The year was 2247, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for 15 years. It was not an easy journey. When aliens first made contact with Earth, humans were excited but also scared. They did not know what to expect from the vast universe beyond their small planet. The Council was made up of 47 different alien species, each with their own cultures, laws, and ways of thinking. Earth was the newest member, and many older species looked down on humans as primitive newcomers who had barely learned to travel between stars. Ambassador Jack Sullivan represented Earth at the Council. He was a patient man with gray hair and tired eyes. Before becoming a diplomat, he had been a soldier. He knew how to fight, but he preferred to talk. For 10 years, Sullivan worked hard to earn respect for humanity. He attended endless meetings, listened to complaints, and always stayed calm even when other species insulted his people. He believed that patience and wisdom would eventually win them over. Sullivan lived and worked on Gateway Station, a massive structure floating in space. The station was like a small city where thousands of beings from different worlds lived and worked together. It served as the headquarters for the Galactic Council. Human quarters were in the outer ring, far from the prestigious central areas where powerful species had their embassies. Even the location of their rooms reminded humans that they were still outsiders. Commander Kate Morrison was in charge of security for all humans on the station. She had a team of 12 trained specialists who protected Earth's people and interests. Morrison was younger than Sullivan, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She and Sullivan had worked together for years, and they understood each other without needing many words. While Sullivan dealt with politics and diplomacy, Morrison handled practical matters and kept everyone safe. One day, a young scientist named Dr. Alex Carter arrived at Gateway Station. He was only 28 years old, but his work was already famous among those who studied biology across different species. Carter had discovered ways to use medicines that worked for one alien species to help treat diseases in other species. His research could save billions of lives throughout the galaxy. He came to the station to present his findings to the Council's medical committee. Carter was excited and nervous. This was his first time leaving Earth, and everything about the station amazed him. He stared at the strange aliens walking past him in the corridors. He tried foods from worlds he had only read about in books. He sent messages back home to his family and his girlfriend, telling them about every wonderful thing he saw. He believed in the promise of the Galactic Council, that different species could work together to make the universe a better place. 3 days after Carter arrived, he was walking through the station's commercial district. This was a busy area filled with shops, restaurants, and entertainment from dozens of different worlds. Carter was carrying a container of blue liquid, a popular drink from one of the friendly alien species. He was reading something on his data pad and not paying full attention to where he was going. He bumped into someone and the container slipped from his hands. The blue liquid splashed all over the being he had collided with. Carter looked up and his heart dropped. He had just spilled his drink all over Prince Zephon of the Vakrian Empire. The prince was wearing expensive ceremonial robes that were now stained and dripping with blue liquid. The Vakrians were a warrior race. They were tall, muscular beings with gray skin and proud faces. Their culture was built on ideas of honor and strength. They believed that any insult, no matter how small, required a response. Prince Zephon was a member of the royal family, and he had a reputation for being quick to anger. Carter immediately started apologizing. He spoke quickly, his words tumbling over each other in his panic. He bowed deeply, the way humans had been taught to show respect to alien dignitaries. He offered to pay for new robes, for cleaning, for anything the prince needed. He explained it was an accident and begged for forgiveness. His voice shook with genuine regret. A crowd had gathered to watch. Beings from many different species stood in a circle around them. Some recorded the incident on their devices. Prince Zephon stood very still, blue liquid dripping from his clothes. His face showed disgust and rage. He had been dealing with failed trade negotiations all week, and his mood was already terrible. This clumsy human had just made everything worse. The prince said something in his own language, words that the translation devices could not capture the full meaning of. Then he reached to his belt and pulled out an energy blade. The weapon hummed to life, glowing with deadly power. Carter's eyes went wide. He took a step back, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. The crowd gasped. Some people started shouting for security. Prince Zephon moved faster than Carter could react. The energy blade flashed once and Carter fell to the ground. Blood pooled around his body. The young scientist's last expression was one of confusion and shock. He did not understand why this was happening. He had just bumped into someone. He had apologized. How had it come to this? The commercial district fell silent. Everyone stared at the body lying on the floor. Prince Zephyr calmly cleaned his blade and put it back on his belt. He looked around at the shocked faces and spoke clearly so everyone could hear. Under Vacrian law, he said, any insult to royal honor could be answered with immediate justice. This human had insulted him, and he had responded according to the traditions of his people. Commander Morrison received the emergency alert on her communication device. She ran to the commercial district as fast as she could, her security team right behind her. When she arrived at the scene, she saw Alex Carter lying dead on the ground. She saw the blood, the shocked witnesses, and Prince Zephyr standing calmly nearby with several Vacrian guards around him. Morrison ordered her team to secure the area and check on Carter, though she already knew he was gone. Medical personnel arrived and confirmed the death. Morrison's hands clenched into fists, but she kept her voice professional as she spoke into her communicator. She reported the situation to Ambassador Sullivan and requested immediate assistance from station security. Station security arrived, but they seemed uncertain about what to do. Prince Zephyr had diplomatic immunity as a member of the Vacrian royal family. The Vacrian guards formed a protective circle around the prince. They made it clear that they would not allow him to be arrested or questioned. The prince had acted within his rights according to his culture's laws, they said. There was nothing to investigate. Ambassador Sullivan arrived 20 minutes later. He walked slowly to where Carter's body lay, now covered with a white sheet. Sullivan knelt beside the young man, and for a long moment he said nothing. Morrison stood nearby and watched Sullivan's face. She saw something dangerous flickering in his eyes, something she had only seen once before many years ago when Sullivan was still a military commander. Sullivan stood up and approached Prince Zephyr. He spoke quietly, asking the prince to come with him to answer questions about the incident. The prince refused. He had done nothing wrong according to Vacrian tradition, he repeated. Sullivan tried to explain that they were not on a Vacrian world, that station law applied here. The prince laughed at this. Who would dare to arrest him? Who would dare to challenge the Vacrian Empire? Sullivan turned away from the prince and contacted the Galactic Council leadership. He demanded an emergency session to discuss this murder. Within hours, he stood before the council and presented all the evidence. There was video footage from multiple cameras. There were witnesses from 6 different species. Everything was clear. A human had accidentally bumped into someone, apologized immediately, and was killed for it. The council listened to Sullivan's presentation. Then they discussed the matter among themselves for several hours. Finally, they delivered their decision. They expressed sadness over this unfortunate incident. They acknowledged that Dr. Carter's death was tragic. However, they reminded Sullivan that the Treaty of Universal Peace required respecting all cultural practices. The Vacrian Honor Code was part of their protected traditions. Perhaps Earth and the Vacrian Empire could work out some compensation for the family. Sullivan stood very still as he listened to this response. Compensation, they said. Mediation, they suggested. As if money could replace a human life. As if this was just a misunderstanding between different cultures. He thanked the council for their time with perfect diplomatic courtesy. Then he returned to his quarters and began writing the most important message of his career. A message that would change everything for Earth and the galaxy. Ambassador Sullivan sat alone in his quarters late that night. The station's artificial lights had dimmed to simulate evening, but he could not sleep. He kept seeing Alex Carter's face, young and full of hope, excited about his research and the future. Now that future was gone, erased in a moment of senseless violence. Sullivan had spent 10 years building relationships with the council, always patient, always diplomatic. Tonight he questioned whether any of it mattered. He began writing his report to Earth's government. Every word had to be chosen carefully. This message would determine how humanity responded to the first murder of one of their citizens in galactic space. Sullivan described the incident in precise detail, leaving nothing out. He attached all the video footage, all the witness statements, all the evidence that showed exactly what happened. Then he described the council's response. He explained how they treated Carter's death as a minor cultural misunderstanding. He detailed their suggestion of financial compensation and mediation. He made clear that the council saw humans as too weak and too desperate for acceptance to do anything meaningful about this injustice. They believed Earth would swallow this insult because humans had nowhere else to go. Sullivan wrote his official recommendation to work within the system and continue diplomatic efforts. But then he added a personal note addressed directly to President Victoria Hayes. He wrote that the council had made a serious mistake. They looked at human diplomats and assumed humanity was soft. They did not understand Earth's history or what humans were capable of when pushed too far. They had forgotten, or perhaps never learned, that choosing peace does not mean accepting injustice. The message took hours to write. When Sullivan finally sent it through the secure communication channel to Earth, the sun was rising on the station's viewing screens. He sat back in his chair and closed his eyes. Whatever happened next was out of his hands now. The decision belonged to people back home, to leaders who would have to weigh the cost of justice against the safety of all humanity. 3 days later, President Hayes sat in the Situation Room deep beneath the White House. The room was designed to withstand any attack, filled with screens and communication equipment that kept the president connected to the entire world. Around the table sat the most powerful people in Earth's government. General Marcus Wright commanded the military forces. Director Lisa Chang ran all intelligence operations. Secretary Peter Goldman handled relations with other nations and now with alien species. Fleet Admiral Cristina Torres controlled the space navy that most aliens did not know existed. They watched the footage of Carter's death multiple times. Each viewing made the injustice clearer. A young man apologizing, bowing respectfully, offering to make things right. Then the blade, the fall, the blood spreading across the station floor. Some people in the room looked away. Others watched with cold anger building in their eyes. When the video ended, the room stayed silent for a long moment. General Wright spoke first. He outlined 3 possible responses. Earth could accept the Council's mediation and take whatever compensation they offered. Earth could withdraw from Council membership and return to isolation. Or Earth could demand that Prince Zephon be handed over to face trial under human law. Each option had serious consequences, and Wright explained them all in detail. Director Chang added intelligence reports she had been gathering for years. The Vakrian Empire was powerful, but they were spread thin across multiple territories. They were currently fighting small conflicts on 3 different borders. Their military was strong but not invincible. If it came to confrontation, the Vakrians would have weaknesses that could be exploited. Secretary Goldman argued for caution. Earth was still new to galactic society. Humanity was learning the rules of a game that other species had played for thousands of years. One tragic death should not destroy everything they had worked to build. Goldman reminded everyone that Earth was far from home, outnumbered by species that had weapons and technology humans were still trying to understand. Sometimes survival required accepting difficult truths. Admiral Torres said very little during these discussions. She simply waited for the president to ask her the one question that mattered. When Hayes finally looked at her and asked if the fleet was ready, Torres answered with a single word. Yes. The room fell silent again. Everyone understood what that meant. For 15 years, Earth had been hiding something from the galaxy. President Hayes listened to all the arguments without interrupting. She was a former senator who had won election on promises of bringing Earth into the galactic community as equals, not as beggars grateful for scraps. She had worked hard to maintain good relations with the Council, while also ensuring that Earth kept its independence and strength. Now all those years of careful planning would be tested. Hayes opened a file on her tablet and read aloud from Alex Carter's personal records. He was 28 years old. He grew up in a small town and dreamed of exploring space since he was a child. He was engaged to marry a woman named Rachel, who taught elementary school. He loved playing guitar and cooking meals for his friends. His research on cross-species medicine could have saved countless lives throughout the galaxy. He had been excited to present his work to the Council, believing it would help bring different species closer together. The president closed the file and looked around the table at each person. She said that the Council's response revealed how they truly saw humanity. They believed humans were desperate outsiders who would accept any treatment just to remain part of galactic society. They thought Earth's peaceful approach came from weakness rather than choice. They assumed humans would forget about Alex Carter if offered enough money. Hayes made her decision. Earth would not accept mediation. Earth would not accept compensation. Earth demanded that Prince Zephon be surrendered immediately to face trial for murder under human law. If the Council refused, Earth would withdraw from membership, but withdrawal would not end the matter. The prince would still be held accountable for his crime. She gave orders to each person in the room. Admiral Torres would prepare the fleet for immediate deployment. General Wright would activate military contingency plans that had been developed in secret over many years. Director Chang would ensure that all human personnel in Council space were ready for emergency evacuation. Secretary Goldman would begin reaching out to neutral alien species who might support Earth's position. The meeting lasted 6 hours. By the end, everyone understood the magnitude of what Earth was about to do. They were challenging not just the Vacrian Empire, but the entire structure of galactic politics. They were risking everything humanity had built over 15 years. Some people in the room thought the president was making a terrible mistake. Others believed it was the only choice that honored human values. What none of the Council species knew was that Earth had been preparing for this possibility since the day they joined galactic society. Human leaders remembered their own history, how powerful nations often bullied weaker ones until the weak found strength to resist. They knew that respect in the universe might require more than diplomatic words and patient negotiation. While Earth presented a friendly face to the galaxy, showing only a small fleet of exploration and transport vessels, they had been building something much larger in secret, hidden in the far reaches of the solar system, scattered among human colonies waiting in the darkness between stars. 300 warships lay ready. These ships used technology that combined human innovation with alien science in ways the Council had never imagined possible. More than just ships, Earth had been training crews in tactics and strategies developed from thousands of years of human warfare. While other species fought according to ancient traditions and rigid honor codes, humans had learned to adapt, to think creatively, to find advantages in unexpected places. Every officer in the fleet had studied battles from Earth's history and learned lessons that alien commanders had never considered. Admiral Torres began sending coded messages to fleet commanders throughout human space. Ships that had been waiting on standby started moving toward predetermined coordinates. Crews that had trained for years, wondering if they would ever see action, began final preparations. Engineers checked weapon systems that had never been fired in anger. Marines practiced boarding operations they hoped they would never need to use. On Gateway Station, Commander Morrison received orders to prepare for evacuation. She started moving human personnel quietly, a few people at a time so as not to alert the Council that something major was happening. Scientists packed their research. Diplomats secured important documents. Families with children left first, then support staff, then everyone except essential security personnel. Within 2 days, the human presence on the station had shrunk to just a few dozen people. Ambassador Sullivan watched these preparations with mixed feelings. Part of him still hoped for a diplomatic solution. He had spent 10 years building relationships with Council members, learning their cultures, earning small amounts of respect through patience and wisdom. All of that work might be destroyed in the coming days. But another part of him, the part that had been a soldier before becoming a diplomat, understood that sometimes words were not enough. Sometimes justice. 3 days after receiving his orders from Earth, Ambassador Sullivan stood before the full Galactic Council. The chamber was enormous, built to hold representatives from 47 different species. Tiers of seats rose in a circle around the central speaking platform. Some species preferred high perches, others sat close to the ground. The air was filled with different languages being translated through devices that everyone wore. Sullivan had spoken from this platform many times over the years. He had given speeches about human achievements, about Earth's desire for cooperation, about the benefits of working together. He had always been polite, measured, careful not to offend anyone. Today would be different. Today he would deliver a message that would shock the entire galaxy. The chamber fell quiet as Sullivan began to speak. His voice was clear and strong, carrying to every corner of the room. He started by summarizing the incident. Dr. Alex Carter, a human scientist, was murdered by Prince Zephon of the Vacrian Empire. The killing was unprovoked and captured on multiple cameras. Dozens of witnesses from 6 different species saw everything. The evidence was beyond dispute. Sullivan then stated Earth's demand. Prince Zephon must be surrendered to human authorities to stand trial for murder. The trial would follow human law and respect all of the prince's rights as a defendant. But justice must be served. The council had 72 hours to comply with this demand. If the prince was not surrendered, Earth would withdraw its membership from the Galactic Council immediately. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives began shouting in dozens of languages. Some expressed outrage at human arrogance. Others seemed shocked that Earth would risk everything over one individual. The Vacrian delegation stood as a group, their faces showing fury and disbelief. How dare these primitive humans demand the surrender of a royal prince? Ambassador Krell of the Vacrian Empire pushed his way to the speaking platform. He was a large, imposing figure with scars from many battles. He pointed at Sullivan and declared that the Empire would never surrender a member of the royal family to an inferior species. Prince Zephan had acted according to Vacrian tradition. The matter was closed. If humans could not accept this, perhaps they were not mature enough for galactic society. Sullivan listened to Krell's speech without expression. When the Vacrian ambassador finished, Sullivan added one more statement. He spoke directly to the Vacrian delegation. Any attempt to shelter the prince or interfere with his extradition would be considered an act of hostility against Earth and all human citizens. Sullivan did not elaborate on what such hostility would bring, but his tone made clear that consequences would follow. After the session ended, High Chancellor Orvex approached Sullivan privately. Orvex was ancient even by the standards of his long-lived species. He had been leading the council for over a century. He spoke to Sullivan with the tone of an adult explaining reality to a naive child. Did Sullivan truly believe Earth could survive outside council protection? Did he understand how many hostile species existed in the galaxy? The Chancellor offered alternatives. Enhanced compensation for Carter's family, formal apologies from the Vacrian government, guarantees of future protection for all human citizens. Perhaps Prince Zephan could attend cultural sensitivity training. Orvex listed many options, but none of them included surrendering the prince for trial. That was simply impossible. It would insult the Vacrian Empire and set a dangerous precedent. Sullivan listened patiently to everything Orvex said. When the Chancellor finished, Sullivan asked a simple question. Did the Council believe that human life had the same value as the life of any other species in the galaxy? Or did it not? Orvex hesitated, then began talking about cultural differences and the need for understanding various traditions. Sullivan thanked him for his time and walked away. The Chancellor's inability to give a direct answer told Sullivan everything he needed to know. While the Council debated what to do about Earth's ultimatum, Commander Morrison was working quietly behind the scenes. She supervised the evacuation of the last non-essential human personnel from Gateway Station and other Council facilities. Transport ships carried them away in small groups, so as not to cause panic or alert the Council that something major was happening. Morrison had been preparing for this possibility for years. Her security team had mapped every corridor of Gateway Station, studied every security system, documented every emergency procedure. They knew where the vulnerable points were, where the backup generators were located, which airlocks could be sealed remotely. If the situation turned hostile, humans would not be caught unprepared. Far from Council space, Admiral Torres was moving the human fleet into position. 300 warships that the Council did not know existed began converging on coordinates that had been chosen years ago. The ships maintained strict communication silence and used stealth technology that prevented Council sensors from detecting them. They gathered in the darkness between stars, waiting for the order to reveal themselves. These ships represented 15 years of secret work. Human engineers had taken alien technology and improved it in ways that should not have been possible. They combined it with innovations that came from uniquely human ways of thinking about problems. The result was a fleet that could match or exceed anything the major galactic powers possessed, and the Council had no idea it existed. Emperor Vex of the Vacrian Empire issued a public response to Earth's ultimatum. His statement dripped with contempt and arrogance. The Empire answered to no one, certainly not to a species that had barely learned to travel between stars. Prince Zephan had acted within his rights under Vacrian law. Any human who disagreed was welcome to challenge the prince to honorable single combat. The Emperor's statement continued with thinly veiled threats. The Vacrian fleet was 10 times larger than Earth's known vessels. If humans proved foolish enough to pursue this matter, They would learn the true cost of insulting a warrior culture. Perhaps humanity needed to be taught humility. Perhaps they were not ready for the responsibilities of galactic citizenship after all. Sullivan forwarded the Emperor's statement to President Hayes without adding any commentary. The President read it and felt her resolve strengthen. The Vakrians believed that might made right, that superior force justified any action. They thought humans would back down when faced with threats. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The Council leadership sent urgent messages to Earth during those 3 days. They painted terrible pictures of what would happen if humanity withdrew from the Council. They would be alone in a dangerous galaxy. They would lose access to important trade routes. They would be vulnerable to species that had grudges against them. They reminded Earth's leaders of their responsibility to protect their citizens. Some members of Earth's government began to waver. Perhaps the President was being too aggressive. Perhaps they should accept the Chancellor's compromise offers. The cost of conflict could be catastrophic. But President Hayes remained firm. She reminded her advisors that Alex Carter had been a citizen of Earth, under Earth's protection. If they abandoned him now, what message would that send? That human lives were negotiable? That Earth would accept any injustice to avoid conflict? The 72 hours passed slowly. On Gateway Station, the remaining humans prepared for whatever would come next. In the Situation Room on Earth, President Hayes and her advisors monitored communications and tracked fleet movements. Throughout Council space, alien species watched and waited, wondering if the humans were bluffing or if they truly meant to follow through with their threat. When the deadline arrived, the Council convened an emergency session. Many members still believed that Earth would back down at the last moment. They had seen this pattern before with younger species. Bold declarations were made, then practical reality set in and the species accepted whatever compromise was offered. Surely humans would be no different. Ambassador Sullivan entered the Council chamber one last time. He walked to the central platform with steady steps, his face showing no emotion. The chamber fell silent as everyone waited to hear whether Earth would retreat or advance. Sullivan began speaking in a calm, clear voice that somehow sounded sad and determined at the same time. He thanked the Council for 15 years of cooperation. He expressed genuine regret that circumstances had reached this point. He acknowledged the friendships that had been built and the progress that had been made. But Earth's position remained unchanged. Justice was not something that could be negotiated away or bought with compensation. Since the Council had chosen to protect a murderer rather than deliver justice, Earth had no choice but to withdraw its membership. Effective immediately, the chamber erupted again, but Sullivan was not finished. He turned to face the Vakrian delegation directly. His voice became harder, colder. Earth held Prince Zephon personally responsible for the murder of Dr. Alex Carter. This debt would be collected. Whether the prince chose to surrender voluntarily or whether humanity had to come and collect him, the outcome was inevitable. The prince would stand trial. Justice would be served. Sullivan walked out of the chamber without waiting for a response. Behind him, chaos reigned as representatives shouted questions and accusations. Commander Morrison and her remaining security team were waiting. 12 hours after Earth withdrew from the Galactic Council, 300 human warships appeared throughout Council space simultaneously. They emerged from stealth in perfect coordination, dropping their cloaking systems at precisely the same moment across dozens of different locations. The synchronized appearance was itself a demonstration of capabilities that shocked every military analyst in the galaxy. Council sensors, which had shown empty space moments before, suddenly detected massive fleets appearing near major trade routes, strategic stations, and important worlds. The ships were not scattered randomly but positioned with clear purpose. Each group occupied locations that would allow them to control key areas of Council space if conflict erupted. The military precision of the deployment made it clear that this operation had been planned for years. Admiral Torres broadcast a message from her flagship, a massive vessel named Independence. The message was transmitted on all frequencies in every major galactic language. Her words were simple and direct. Earth sought only one objective. Prince Zephon of the Vakrian Empire would be brought to trial for the murder of Dr. Alex Carter. Any attempt to interfere with this objective would be met with appropriate force. The fleet would not fire first, but it would not hesitate to defend itself and complete its mission. Alien military commanders studied the human ships carefully, trying to understand what they faced. The vessels were unlike anything in the Council fleets. They incorporated design principles that seemed to defy conventional understanding. Their shields generated energy signatures that suggested power far beyond what ships of that size should possess. Their weapons arrays combined multiple technologies and configurations that should not work together but somehow did. Intelligence agencies throughout the galaxy scrambled to understand how Earth had built such a fleet in secret. Where had the resources come from? Where were the ships constructed? How had humans kept such a massive project hidden for years? The questions multiplied, but answers were scarce. It became clear that while Earth had appeared to be a minor player in galactic affairs, they had been preparing for this possibility since the day they joined the Council. The largest concentration of human ships took position around Vakros Prime, the homeworld of the Vakrian Empire. More than 100 warships formed a blockade that surrounded the planet at strategic points. They did not attack. They did not threaten civilian vessels. They simply waited in formation. A clear demonstration that Earth had the capability to strike at the heart of the Empire, if they chose to do so. Emperor Vex watched the human fleet from his palace and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. The Vakrian military had been supreme in this region of space for centuries. They had crushed rebellions, conquered weaker species, and enforced their will through overwhelming force. Now an upstart human fleet had appeared at their homeworld, and there was nothing he could immediately do about it. The Emperor ordered a full military mobilization. Vakrian warships began converging on their homeworld from border regions and allied territories. Within days, hundreds of ships had gathered, outnumbering the human fleet by more than 2 to 1. Vakrian commanders were confident. They had fought wars for centuries. They understood tactics and strategy. These humans might have surprising technology, but experience and numbers would prevail. As the Vakrian fleet assembled, their commanders noticed something disturbing. The human ships were not positioned where military doctrine said they should be. Standard defensive formations placed heavy ships in the center with lighter vessels on the flanks. The humans seemed to be ignoring these principles, positioning their ships in patterns that made no sense according to traditional military thinking. When Vakrian vessels attempted to form standard attack formations, they discovered that human ships were already moving to counter them. The humans seemed to anticipate every maneuver before it was executed. Their fleet moved with precision that suggested a level of coordination that should not be possible across such distances. Vakrian communication systems had slight delays even with the best technology. The human fleet appeared to operate as a single organism. Commander Morrison, now aboard one of the fleet vessels, watched the Vakrian preparations with professional interest. She had studied their military history and understood their tactical preferences. The Vakrians fought with courage and honor, but they followed rigid traditions. They believed in frontal assaults and overwhelming force. Human commanders had learned different lessons from thousands of years of warfare on Earth. They understood adaptation, deception, and finding advantages in unexpected places. The Vakrian fleet made its move on the 4th day of the standoff. 300 warships advanced on the human formation in a massive battle line that stretched across thousands of kilometers. It was an impressive sight, a demonstration of military power meant to overwhelm through sheer force. The Vakrians opened fire first, launching missiles and energy weapons at the closest human vessels. What happened next shocked every Vakrian commander and every observer monitoring the battle from across the galaxy. Human shields absorbed the incoming fire without collapsing. Weapons that should have destroyed ships barely scratched their hulls. Point defense systems intercepted missiles with accuracy that approached perfection, and when the humans returned fire, their weapons punched through Vakrian shields like they were not there. The engagement lasted 4 hours. During that time, the human fleet did not remain stationary like Vakrian doctrine expected. They moved constantly, breaking into smaller groups, reforming in different configurations, attacking from unexpected angles. Vakrian commanders tried to adapt, but every time they issued new orders, the humans had already shifted position. It was like fighting shadows. Human weapons were devastatingly effective. They seemed to target the exact weak points in Vakrian shield systems. Engines were disabled with precise shots. Weapon arrays were destroyed while life support remained intact. The humans were not simply trying to kill Vakrians. They were systematically dismantling the ability of the Vakrian fleet to fight while minimizing casualties. When the battle ended, The Vakrian fleet had lost 42 ships completely destroyed and 63 damaged so severely they had to withdraw. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. Several ships showed damage, certainly. Shields had been depleted. Hulls had been scorched. Some systems needed repair. But every human ship remained combat-capable. The disparity in losses was stunning. Admiral Torres broadcast another message to the Vakrian homeworld. Her voice remained calm and professional, as if she had just completed a training exercise rather than a major battle. Earth did not seek war. Earth sought justice for the murder of one of its citizens. Surrender Prince Zephon and the fleet would withdraw. Continue resistance and the siege would continue until the prince was handed over, or the Empire lost its ability to wage war. The battle near Vakros Prime sent shockwaves through galactic politics. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to discuss what they had witnessed. High Chancellor Orvex looked older than his many years as he addressed the assembly. Earth was not the weak species they had assumed. Earth had capabilities that rivaled or exceeded the major powers in the galaxy. This changed everything. Species that had spoken dismissively of humans now reconsidered their positions. Some began pressuring the Vakrian Empire to surrender Prince Zephon. Why risk further conflict over one individual, even a royal prince? The cost to the Empire and potentially to the wider galaxy was becoming too high. Trade routes were disrupted. Military resources were being diverted. Fear was spreading that this conflict could escalate into something much worse. But Emperor Vex refused to yield. To surrender his son would be to admit that the mighty Vakrian Empire could be bullied by anyone with sufficient force. It would show weakness and invite challenges from rivals and subject species. The Emperor ordered a general mobilization, calling in ships from every border and demanding military support from species that owed the Empire favors or feared its wrath. While the galaxy focused on the siege and the political maneuvering, Commander Morrison was leading a different operation. She and a team of 15 specialists had infiltrated Vakros Prime using stealth technology and techniques that the Vakrians never anticipated. They moved through the capital city like ghosts, avoiding detection through careful planning and exploitation of security gaps that Morrison's team had identified years before. Their objective was simple, but dangerous. Find Prince Zephon and extract him for trial. Morrison's team had trained for this scenario for months using detailed mock-ups constructed from intelligence gathered during the years Earth spent as a council member. They knew every guard rotation, every security protocol, every potential escape route. They had memorized the layout of the royal palace and practiced the operation until every team member could perform their role perfectly. It took 3 days of careful observation to locate the prince and learn his daily routine. He was protected by elite guards and multiple layers of security, but no defense was perfect. Morrison watched from hiding as Zephon went about his life, apparently unconcerned by the crisis happening above his world. He laughed with companions, trained in combat halls, attended formal dinners. Commander Morrison struck at midnight exactly as planned. Her team moved through the royal palace with surgical precision. They had studied the building's layout for months and knew every corridor, every room, every potential obstacle. The first phase involved disabling security systems without triggering alarms. Human technology allowed them to hack into Vakrian networks using methods that the palace's designers had never anticipated. Guards fell one by one as the team advanced deeper into the palace. Morrison's specialists used weapons that rendered targets unconscious without causing permanent harm. 23 security personnel were neutralized in the first 15 minutes. None of them managed to raise an alarm. The humans moved like shadows, appearing and disappearing before the Vakrians could react. Prince Zephon was asleep in his chambers when Morrison entered. She stood over his bed, weapon trained on him, and spoke his name once. The prince woke instantly, warrior instincts bringing him to alertness. He reached for the energy blade he kept beside his bed, but Morrison was faster. She pressed the weapon against his head and read him his rights in flawless Vakrian. He was under arrest for the murder of Dr. Alex Carter. He would be taken to Earth to stand trial. For the first time since killing Carter, Prince Zephon felt genuine fear. He was a warrior trained from birth, decorated in battle, feared by enemies throughout the sector. But these humans moved with a cold efficiency that was unlike anything he had encountered. Morrison's eyes showed no anger, no hatred, just absolute determination. He realized in that moment that resistance would be futile. These humans would complete their mission or die trying. and he did not want to test whether they were willing to kill him. The team administered a sedative that rendered the prince unconscious. They carried him through pre-positioned routes, moving quickly but carefully. Palace security was well trained, but they followed predictable patterns. The humans exploited every gap, every blind spot, every moment of transition between guard shifts. By the time the alarm was raised, Morrison's team was already at the extraction point. A stealth shuttle waited in a secluded courtyard. The team loaded the unconscious prince aboard and lifted off before Vakrian forces could respond. Anti-aircraft systems activated, but the shuttle's stealth technology and evasive flying kept it safe. Within minutes, they had broken atmosphere and were climbing toward orbit. Morrison contacted Admiral Torres with a simple message. Package secured. Mission successful. Emperor Vex was awoken with news that his son had been captured. The old warrior felt something break inside him. Rage, fear, and despair mixed together. He immediately ordered every available ship to attack the human fleet. Every vessel, every weapon, everything the Empire possessed would be thrown at these invaders. His son would be rescued regardless of the cost. The second battle near Vakros Prime was nothing like the first. The Vakrian fleet attacked with desperate fury, abandoning tactical discipline in their determination to reach the human ships before the prince could be taken away. Wave after wave of Vakrian vessels threw themselves at the human defensive positions. The space around the planet became a chaotic firestorm of weapons fire and exploding ships. The human fleet took damage this time. The sheer ferocity and numbers of the Vakrian assault overwhelmed some defensive positions. 3 human ships suffered critical hits and had to withdraw to safe positions for repairs. Dozens more showed battle damage, but the Vakrians paid a terrible price for their attack. Human weapons found their marks with devastating accuracy. Vakrian shields failed under sustained fire. Ships that had served the Empire for decades were reduced to drifting hulks. The battle raged for 6 hours. Admiral Torres directed the defense from Independence, coordinating movements and targeting priorities across the entire fleet. Human crews fought with discipline even under extreme pressure. They had trained for scenarios like this, practiced responding to overwhelming numbers, learned to maintain coordination even in chaos. The training paid off as the fleet held its formation and completed its mission. When Emperor Vex finally ordered a ceasefire, his fleet had been reduced by more than 60%. Centuries of military dominance had been shattered in a single day. The mighty Vakrian Empire had thrown everything it had at a smaller human force and been decisively defeated. Worse than the military loss was the psychological impact. The Vakrians had always believed they were supreme warriors. That belief had died along with thousands of their soldiers. Admiral Torres broadcast one final message to Vakros Prime. Prince Zephon was in custody and would stand trial on Earth for murder. Any further attacks would be met with devastating force that would cripple the Empire's ability to defend itself. Earth had not sought this conflict, but having been forced into it, Earth would finish it. The siege would continue until the Vakrian government formally acknowledged that the prince would face justice under human law. Emperor Vex sat in his throne room surrounded by military advisors and government officials. They all waited for his decision. Some urged continued resistance, arguing that surrender would destroy the Empire's reputation. Others counseled acceptance, pointing out that further fighting would only bring more destruction. The Emperor looked at the casualty reports and the damage assessments. He thought about his son, now a prisoner of an alien species. He thought about the thousands who had died trying to rescue him. The Emperor issued a formal statement acknowledging that Prince Zephon would face trial under human law. He did not apologize. He did not admit wrongdoing, but he accepted reality. The human fleet was not leaving, and the Empire could not defeat them without suffering losses that would leave it vulnerable to enemies on multiple borders. His son would face alien justice. It was a bitter pill, but there was no alternative. Prince Zephon was transported to Earth under heavy guard. The journey took several weeks through human-controlled space routes. The prince remained silent for most of the trip, lost in thought about how drastically his circumstances had changed. He had killed a human expecting no consequences. Now he was a prisoner heading to an alien world to face trial for his actions. The trial was held in an international court, established specifically for this case. It was broadcast across the galaxy, with millions of beings from dozens of species watching the proceedings. The courtroom was designed to accommodate observers from different species. with translation devices and seating arrangements that respected various cultural needs. The trial would follow human legal procedures but would be transparent for all to witness. Attorney General Benjamin Walker led the prosecution. He was a veteran lawyer known for his methodical approach and clear presentation of evidence. He presented video footage from multiple angles showing the entire incident. He called witnesses who testified about what they saw. He brought in experts who explained the forensic evidence. The case was overwhelming. Prince Zephon had killed Alex Carter without provocation or legal justification. The defense argued that Prince Zephon had acted according to his cultural beliefs and training. Under Vakrian law, he had every right to respond to an insult with immediate force. His lawyers claimed that judging him by human standards was unfair. They presented expert witnesses who explained Vakrian honor codes and argued that the prince genuinely believed his actions were justified and necessary. Walker's response was simple and devastating. Alex Carter was murdered on a space station governed by Galactic Council law, not Vakrian law. The prince had no legal authority to act as judge, jury, and executioner. If every species followed only their own laws regardless of where they were, civilized society would collapse into chaos. The prince had committed murder, and the location of the crime determined which laws applied. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Experts testified. Lawyers argued. The prince himself eventually took the stand and explained his actions. He showed no remorse, only confusion that his behavior was being judged at all. To him, responding to an insult was natural and proper. The human obsession with this incident baffled him. It had been a minor matter of honor, nothing more. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning a unanimous verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder. The prince was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years, contingent on demonstrating genuine remorse and understanding of his crime. The sentence was less harsh than some had wanted, but reflected human values about rehabilitation and second chances. Ambassador Sullivan attended the trial as an observer. He sat in the back of the courtroom and watched as justice was finally served for Alex Carter. When the verdict was announced, Sullivan felt no triumph or satisfaction. He thought about the young scientist who had died believing in galactic cooperation. He thought about the thousands who had died in the battles that followed. Justice had been achieved, but at a terrible cost. He wondered if there might have been another way, some path he had failed to see. The aftermath of the trial reshaped galactic politics. The Galactic Council could no longer dismiss humanity as a minor species. Earth commanded respect born of demonstrated strength rather than diplomatic courtesy. High Chancellor Orvex visited Earth personally, offering formal apologies and requesting renewed dialogue. The Council proposed new treaties that acknowledged humanity as a sovereign. 5 years after the trial, the galaxy had settled into a new normal. Earth had not rejoined the Galactic Council formally, but human representatives maintained relationships with most member species through bilateral agreements and informal cooperation. Ambassador Sullivan returned to Gateway Station, though his role was now different. He operated as an independent diplomat, building bridges between Earth and species willing to work with humanity on equal terms. The human fleet remained at full readiness, though most ships had returned to positions throughout human-controlled space. Admiral Torres oversaw a navy that was now openly acknowledged as one of the most powerful in the galaxy. Other species no longer dismissed human military capabilities. Some sought alliances with Earth, hoping to benefit from human technology and tactical expertise. Others viewed humanity with suspicion and fear, worried about what this aggressive species might do next. Commander Morrison had been promoted to general and now commanded all of Earth's security operations throughout human territory. She oversaw the training of new personnel and the techniques that had proven so effective during the crisis. Her academy became legendary, teaching not just combat skills but strategic thinking and cultural awareness. Morrison emphasized that strength without wisdom led to tyranny, while wisdom without strength led to victimhood. Humans needed both. The Vakrian Empire struggled to recover from its defeat. Emperor Vex had died 2 years after the trial, some said from a broken heart. His successor, Empress Kara, was younger and more pragmatic. She understood that the old ways had failed. The empire could no longer dominate through force alone. She began cautious reforms, reducing military expenditures and investing in diplomacy and trade. Many traditional Vakrians opposed these changes, but the devastation of the war made alternatives difficult to argue for. Prince Zephon remained in a human prison facility, designed specifically for alien inmates. The facility was secure but humane, treating prisoners with respect while preventing escape. The prince had adapted to imprisonment better than anyone expected. He spent his days reading, studying human history and philosophy, and reflecting on the choices that had brought him to this place. His arrogance had faded, replaced by something that might have been the beginning of wisdom. A young reporter named Claire Patterson requested an interview with the prince for a documentary about the incident and its aftermath. After months of negotiations, permission was granted. Patterson traveled to the prison with a camera crew and sat across from Prince Zephon in a monitored visiting room. The prince looked older than his years, gray hair showing at his temples, his warrior's body softened by years of confinement. Patterson asked the prince what he had learned from his experience. Zephon was silent for a long moment before answering. He said that he had been raised to believe that power justified action, that strength determined right and wrong. His culture taught him that insults required immediate response, that honor was the highest value. He had killed Alex Carter because his training and beliefs told him it was not just acceptable but necessary. But humans had taught him something different. The prince continued. They taught him that all actions have consequences, that justice matters more than power or tradition. They could have killed him in revenge, could have executed him after the trial. Instead, they gave him time to think, to learn, to potentially become better than he was. That mercy was more powerful than any weapon. Patterson asked if he felt remorse for killing Dr. Carter. Zephon nodded slowly. He said that it took years for him to truly understand what he had done. At first he was simply angry at being imprisoned, but gradually, as he learned about Carter's life and work, as he read about human values and history, he began to see his victim as a person rather than an abstract insult to his honor. The remorse came slowly, but it was real. He would carry the weight of that death for the rest of his life. The documentary aired across human networks and was eventually distributed to other species willing to watch it. Many found the prince's transformation compelling. Others remained skeptical, believing it was an act to improve his chances at eventual parole. But the documentary sparked conversations throughout the galaxy about justice, redemption, and how different cultures could coexist while maintaining their core values. On Earth, Rachel Carter had built a new life. She never married, choosing instead to dedicate herself to continuing Alex's work. She established a foundation that provided grants for young scientists working on cross-species medical research. The foundation had funded dozens of projects that were making real differences in treating diseases across multiple species. In a way, Alex's dream of bringing species together through science was being realized, though he would never see it. Rachel attended the memorial ceremony on Gateway Station every year. She stood before the statue of Alex and thought about the life they might have had together. The pain had dulled over the years but never disappeared. She understood why Earth had responded so forcefully to his death. Justice mattered. The message that human lives could not be taken without consequences was important. But she also wondered about all the people who died in the battles that followed. Their families mourned too. Ambassador Sullivan attended the memorial ceremony as well. He and Rachel had formed an unlikely friendship over the years. They both carried guilt about the crisis, wondering if different choices might have prevented so much suffering. Sullivan still questioned whether he could have found a diplomatic solution that avoided war. Rachel wondered if Alex would have wanted his death to spark such violence. They talked about these doubts every year, finding some comfort in shared uncertainty. High Chancellor Orvex also attended the ceremony regularly. The elderly leader had announced his retirement, citing age and fatigue. But before stepping down, he wanted to ensure that the reforms sparked by the crisis became permanent. The Council had revised its legal framework to better protect individuals from cultural practices that violated basic rights. They established courts that could prosecute crimes committed on Council property, regardless of the perpetrator's species or status. At one ceremony, Orvex gave a speech that many considered his finest moment. He admitted that the Council had failed Alex Carter and failed humanity. They had been so focused on maintaining political stability that they forgot about basic justice. Earth's response, while shocking and costly, forced the galaxy to confront uncomfortable truths. Sometimes peace required courage to defend principles, not just skill at avoiding conflict. The speech marked a turning point in relations between Earth and the Council. Conversations began about humanity potentially rejoining as a full member under revised terms that recognized them as equals. President Hayes, now in her second term, approached these discussions carefully. She insisted that any agreement must include ironclad protections for human citizens and genuine respect for Earth's sovereignty. The negotiations were slow and difficult, but progress was being made. Throughout the galaxy, the phrase "they murdered one human" became shorthand for a lesson that had been learned the hard way. Younger species studying galactic politics learned about the incident as a case study in the dangers of dismissing newer members. Military academies analyzed the battles as examples of how tactical innovation could overcome numerical superiority. Diplomatic schools debated whether Earth's response was justified or excessive. A Vakrian scholar named Lyra wrote a thesis about the crisis that became required reading at universities across multiple species. Her work examined how cultural differences could lead to tragedy when not properly understood and respected. She argued that both Vakrian honor culture and human emphasis on individual rights had validity, but neither could be imposed universally without causing conflict. Coexistence required flexibility and willingness to find common ground. Lyra interviewed many participants in the crisis for her research. She spoke with Admiral Torres about military strategy, with Commander Morrison about the extraction operation, with surviving Vakrian officers about their experience fighting humans. She even secured an interview with Prince Zephon, asking him about his transformation from proud warrior to prisoner seeking redemption. His answer formed the conclusion of her thesis. The prince told Lyra that he had lived his entire life believing that strength determined worth. The strongest warrior, the most powerful empire, the most dominant culture, these were what mattered. Weakness deserved contempt, but imprisonment had taught him to see strength differently. True strength was not the ability to hurt others without consequence. True strength was the discipline to show mercy, the wisdom to seek justice, the courage to admit mistakes and try to do better. Lyra titled her thesis, "They Murdered One Human: How Earth's Response Changed Galactic Politics Forever." The title captured both the tragedy that started everything and the lasting impact it had. The thesis won multiple academic awards and was translated into dozens of languages. It became the definitive historical account of the crisis, required reading for anyone wanting to understand modern galactic relations. 10 years after Alex Carter's death, a conference was held on Earth to discuss interspecies relations and conflict resolution. Representatives from 40 species attended, including several Vakrians. The opening ceremony,